My brother sold the Swiss watch collection I inherited from Grandpa without telling me 3 days after the funeral, while I was still organizing papers in the office. Marcus broke into my house using the spare key, took the 8 Patek Philippe's that were in the closet safe, and sold them to a collector in Miami for $200,000 to buy a food truck franchise. I found out when the buyer called me asking for the certificates of authenticity, and I didn't even know the watches were gone. The room spun. My hand gripped the edge of Grandpa's mahogany desk so hard my knuckles went white. The collector's voice kept talking on speakerphone, asking about provenance papers, while I stared at the empty velvet case I'd just pulled from my bedroom safe. 8 perfect rectangular indentations where Grandpa's pride and joy had rested for decades. Gone. Marcus had smiled at me that morning over coffee in my kitchen, asked how I was holding up, hugged me. The spare key I'd given him for emergencies last year had been in his pocket the whole time. I should have screamed, should have called the police immediately. Instead, I thanked the collector for his call, asked for his contact information to gather the paperwork, and hung up. My hands were steady as I opened Grandpa's filing cabinet. Behind the tax returns from 1987, I found what I remembered seeing as a teenager, a leather folder containing every certificate, receipt, and appraisal document for the collection. Grandpa had been meticulous. Each watch documented, photographed, with notes about when and where he'd acquired them. The 1956 Calatrava he'd bought in Geneva on his honeymoon, the complications piece from an estate sale in Boston. I pulled out my phone and photographed every single page. Marcus didn't know I'd been named executor of Grandpa's entire estate, not just the watches. He'd left the lawyer's office early, too eager to get to his real prize. What my brother also didn't know was that Grandpa had kept detailed records of everything, including a handwritten will from 2 months ago that I'd found in this very desk yesterday. A will that hadn't been filed yet. A will that specified exactly which grandchild got what, and under what conditions. Marcus had just committed felony theft, but I wasn't going to let the police handle this. Not yet. I had access to every bank account, every property deed, every investment document that bore our family name. And I just realized something interesting about the food truck franchise Marcus was so excited about. It required a $50,000 licensing fee due in 30 days, plus commercial kitchen permits that took months to obtain in our county. He'd need much more than $200,000 to make this work. I smiled as I locked the certificates back in the filing cabinet. Marcus thought he'd gotten away with the perfect crime. He had no idea I was about to make him wish he'd never heard the word Patek Philippe. Marcus posted about his new business venture on social media the next morning. Photos of himself standing in front of a gleaming silver food truck, arms spread wide, caption reading, "Dreams do come true when you take risks." Entrepreneur. New beginnings. Food truck life. Comments poured in from relatives congratulating him. Our Aunt Karen asked how he'd saved up so much money so fast. He replied with a winking emoji and "hard work pays off." I sat in Grandpa's office with the estate lawyer, Vincent Crawford, reviewing documents. Vincent had been Grandpa's attorney for 30 years and knew every detail of the family dynamics. When I showed him the empty watch case and explained what Marcus had done, his jaw tightened. "Those watches were specifically bequeathed to you in the will. This is theft from an estate. We could have him arrested today." I shook my head. "Not yet. I need you to do something else first. File the will immediately. Then I need a complete audit of every asset Marcus thinks he's entitled to." Vincent's eyes gleamed with understanding. He pulled up the estate files on his laptop. "Your grandfather's estate is worth approximately $3.2 million. Marcus was set to inherit the lake house, valued at $450,000, plus a trust fund of $200,000 that vests when he turns 35. He's 33 now." I leaned forward. What happens if a beneficiary commits a crime against the estate? Vincent smiled grimly. "There's a clause. Any beneficiary who acts against the interests of the estate or other beneficiaries through theft, fraud, or deception forfeits all inheritance rights. Everything goes to remaining beneficiaries." Perfect. But I wasn't done. "The lake house, Marcus has been using it every weekend since Grandpa died, hasn't he?" Vincent nodded. "He told me at the funeral he was going to move in permanently next month. Said your grandfather promised it to him verbally." I pulled out my phone and showed Vincent the screenshots I'd taken of Marcus's social media. In one photo from 6 days ago, Marcus stood on the lake house dock holding a beer, captioned, "My new bachelor pad. Thanks, Gramps." In another, he'd tagged himself at a furniture store buying a $7,500 leather sectional for the lake house living room. Vincent's expression darkened. He's already spending money assuming the inheritance is secured. The probate process hasn't even begun. Technically, he's trespassing and vandalizing estate property. I felt a cold satisfaction spreading through my chest. How long until the will goes through probate? Vincent checked his calendar. I can file tomorrow morning. With the theft charge documented, we can request an expedited hearing. 2 weeks, maybe 3. In the meantime, I'll send Marcus a cease and desist letter regarding the lake house. He'll have 72 hours to vacate and return all keys. I thought about the food truck, about the $50,000 licensing fee due in 30 days, about the $200,000 Marcus had already spent assuming more money was coming. Don't send the letter yet, I said slowly. Let him keep spending. Let him think everything's fine. I want him to dig the hole deeper. Vincent raised an eyebrow but nodded. I stood and walked to the window overlooking Grandpa's garden. Marcus had always been the golden child, charming, charismatic, the one who got away with everything because he made people laugh. He'd borrowed money from Grandpa over the years, never paid back, and Grandpa had just smiled and waved it off. But Grandpa had written that final will for a reason. 2 months before he died, Marcus had promised to help renovate Grandpa's bathroom for elderly accessibility. Took $15,000 for materials and labor. Never showed up. Never returned the money. Hired no one. Grandpa had spent his final months struggling to use a bathtub he couldn't safely enter, too proud to ask for help again. I turned back to Vincent. The watch collector in Miami, can we contact him about returning the pieces? Vincent made a note. If we provide proof of theft and ownership, he'd be legally obligated to return them or face charges for possessing stolen goods. We'd need to move quickly before he sells them to someone else. I pulled out the collector's business card. His name is Raymond Chen. I already called him back yesterday and told him there was a complication with the certificates. Asked him not to resell anything until I sorted out the paperwork. He agreed to wait 2 weeks. Vincent looked impressed. You're thinking 3 moves ahead. I smiled without humor. Marcus taught me that. He just never thought I was paying attention. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Hey sis, want to grab dinner this week? Haven't seen you since the funeral. Miss you. The casual cruelty of it made my blood ice over. He was sitting on $200,000 of my inheritance, planning his future in a lake house that wasn't his, and pretending everything was normal. I texted back. Sure. Would love to catch up. How about Friday? His response came immediately. Perfect, my treat. I wondered what he'd order with my money. Wondered if he'd look me in the eye while he lied about where his sudden wealth came from. Wondered if he'd thought about me at all when he broke into my house and stole the only things Grandpa had specifically wanted me to have. Vincent gathered his files. I'll prepare everything for filing. The moment you give me the word, this all moves forward. He'll lose the lake house, the trust fund, everything. I walked him to the door, but something else was nagging at me. The food truck franchise? Can you look into the company he bought from? I want to know everything about them. Licenses required, failure rates, any lawsuits. Vincent paused. You think there's something wrong with it? I thought about Marcus's impulsiveness, his history of jumping into schemes without research, the way he always assumed things would work out because they always had before. I think my brother saw an opportunity and assumed his charm would handle the details. I want to know exactly what details he's ignoring. As Vincent left, I sat back down at Grandpa's desk. The empty watch case sat in front of me. 8 spaces where history used to live. 8 pieces of Grandpa's legacy that Marcus had converted to cash without a second thought. But Marcus had made one critical mistake. He'd stolen from someone who actually knew how to plan, someone who understood that patience was sharper than any immediate action, someone who'd spent the last 3 days documenting everything, preparing everything, while he posted celebration photos online. I opened my laptop and started a spreadsheet. Column 1, Marcus's known expenses. Column 2, His expected inheritance. Column 3. The gap between them when the inheritance vanished. The numbers told a beautiful story of financial destruction. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus. Oh, and bring copies of any estate paperwork you have? Want to make sure we're on the same page about everything. Just want it all settled smooth, you know? I stared at that message for a long moment. He was checking to see what I knew, making sure I hadn't found anything that would threaten his plans. The audacity was almost impressive. I typed back, "Of course, I'll bring everything I have." And I would, just not the way he expected. Friday evening, I met Marcus at Riverside Grill, the upscale restaurant where Grandpa used to take us for birthdays. Marcus was already seated, wearing a new suit that probably cost $1,500. His Tag Heuer watch caught the light, also new. He stood and hugged me, all warmth and brotherly affection. "You look tired, Becca. You holding up okay?" I slid into the booth across from him, setting my purse carefully beside me. Inside was a folder containing copies of documents Vincent had prepared. Not the originals. Never the originals. "It's been hard, lots of paperwork with the estate. You know how it is." Marcus nodded sympathetically and poured me wine from the bottle he'd already ordered. $60 a bottle according to the menu I'd checked online. "That's actually why I wanted to talk. I think we should sell Grandpa's house, split everything 50-50. Clean break, you know? Then we can both move on." I sipped the wine slowly. "What about the lake house? I thought you were planning to keep that." His expression brightened. "Oh yeah, definitely, but I was thinking, since you're getting Grandpa's watch collection and I'm taking the lake house, that's pretty even, right? Then we split the cash and investments down the middle." The watch collection he'd stolen. The lake house he had no legal right to. I kept my face neutral. "That seems fair. Have you been staying there?" Marcus grinned. "Every weekend. I'm actually moving in full-time next month. Already got furniture delivered. You should come see it. I'm thinking of renting out the spare bedroom on Airbnb. That lake view is worth $300 a night easy." I watched him plan his future in a house he'd never own. "That's smart. What about work? Are you taking time off?" He leaned back, radiating confidence. "Actually, I quit Dalton Marketing yesterday. I'm going all in on the food truck business. Bought a premium spot in the financial district. Hired a chef. Got the truck customized. Opening in 6 weeks." 6 weeks. The probate hearing was in 2.5 weeks. "That's amazing, Marcus. How'd you manage to save enough for all that?" His smile didn't waver. "Been saving for years. Living below my means, you know. Investment accounts, some crypto that paid off. Just good planning." I nodded slowly, setting down my wine. "That's really impressive. Must have taken incredible discipline." The lie sat between us like a third person at the table. Marcus changed the subject smoothly. "So, what estate paperwork did you want to go over? I figured we should make sure we understand everything before we meet with the lawyers." I pulled out the folder, but only showed him the most basic documents. Death certificate, property deed information, bank account summaries with the actual numbers blacked out. "Vincent Crawford is handling everything. He said we need to wait for probate to process before we can access anything. 6 to 8 weeks, probably." I watched Marcus's face carefully. A tiny muscle near his eye twitched. "That long? I thought with you as executor, it would be faster." "It would be," I said carefully, "if there were no complications. But Vincent has to verify all the assets, make sure there are no outstanding debts or claims against the estate. Standard procedure." Marcus's hand tightened around his wine glass. "What kind of claims?" I shrugged. He didn't specify, just said he needed to be thorough. "Why? Is something wrong?" No, just curious." But I could see the calculation in his eyes. He'd spent $200,000. Put deposits down on the food truck, the licenses, probably the rent on the financial district spot. He was counting on that trust fund and the lake house sale to cover his expansion plans. 8 weeks was too long. Our food arrived. Marcus had ordered the $48 steak, and we ate while he talked about his business plans. Premium ingredients, social media marketing, expansion to 3 trucks within a year. Every sentence revealed more debt, more assumptions, more money he didn't have yet. I asked questions that encouraged him to elaborate. Where would he get the second truck? How much was commercial kitchen rental? What were the insurance costs? Each answer dug the hole deeper. Finally, over dessert, Marcus circled back to what was really bothering him. Hey, so about Grandpa's watches, the Patek Philippe's, those are in the estate inventory, right? My heart rate didn't change. I'd practiced this moment. They should be. Why? He shifted in his seat. Just wondering about the appraisal value. For estate tax purposes. Do you know where Grandpa kept them? In his bedroom safe, I think. I haven't actually looked at them yet. Been too emotional. I met his eyes. Why do you ask? Marcus waved a hand dismissively. No reason. Just making sure everything's accounted for. You know how valuable those are. We should probably get them appraised professionally. I could handle that if you want. I know a guy. I bet he did. Probably Raymond Chen's number was still in his phone. That's okay. Vincent said he's arranging for a certified appraiser as part of the estate process. Should happen next week. I paused. Unless you want to see them, we could go over to Grandpa's house tomorrow and look through everything together. I watched the panic flash across his face before he controlled it. Nah, that's okay. I trust you. Just let me know what the appraiser says. He signaled for the check, using the moment to compose himself. When he looked back at me, the charming smile was back in place. This was nice. We should do it more often. Family's important, you know, especially now that Grandpa's gone. The check arrived. $194, which Marcus paid with a black credit card I'd never seen before. Probably maxed out, if his pattern held. As we walked to the parking lot, Marcus hugged me again. Love you, sis. We're going to get through this together, okay? 50-50, just like always. I hugged him back and lied just as smoothly. Love you too. We're all we've got now. I drove home thinking about that credit card, the new suit, the expensive wine. Marcus was spending like he'd already inherited everything. Like the $200,000 was just the beginning. I wondered how much debt he'd racked up in the last week. How many deposits were non-refundable? How much money he'd committed to a future that was never going to happen. When I got home, there was an email from Vincent. He'd researched the food truck franchise. The company had a 72% failure rate in the first year. The licensing fees were even higher than Marcus probably realized, closer to $75,000 once all city permits were included. The financial district spot Marcus mentioned? It required a year lease paid up front, minimum $80,000. Vincent had also found something interesting. Marcus had listed Grandpa's lake house as collateral on a business loan. $50,000 borrowed against property he didn't own. That was fraud. That was prison time. But Vincent's email continued. If we wait until after his business launches, the debt will be much larger. He'll have signed vendor contracts, hired employees, committed to long-term leases. When the inheritance disappears and the creditors come calling, there won't be anything left. He'll have to declare bankruptcy, possibly face criminal charges for the fraudulent loan. The lake house could be seized by the bank before we can even claim it back for the estate. I read that email 3 times. Vincent was showing me the nuclear option. The path that wouldn't just take away Marcus's inheritance, it would destroy his entire life. Leave him with nothing but debt and possibly a criminal record. He'd lose everything he'd built on stolen money and lies. I thought about Grandpa struggling in that bathroom, about the $15,000 Marcus had taken and never returned, about my brother hugging me at dinner while lying to my face about where his money came from, about the watches that represented decades of Grandpa's careful collecting, converted to food truck dreams in 72 hours. I typed back to Vincent, wait until after the business launches. I want the debt maximized. File the will the day before his grand opening. The cursor blinked on the sent message. No going back now. This wasn't just about recovery. This was about making sure Marcus understood exactly what he'd done, that actions had consequences, that stealing from family meant losing everything. My phone buzzed. Marcus had posted another social media update. Photo of him standing in front of his food truck at sunset, arms crossed, looking triumphant. Caption: 5 weeks until we change the game. Thank you to everyone who believed in me. Special thanks to Gramps. I know you're watching over this stream. Couldn't have done it without you. 237 likes already. Aunt Karen commented, so proud of you. Our cousin Jennifer, inspiration. His friends filled the comments with congratulations and requests for free food at the opening. I saved the screenshot, added it to the folder I was building. Evidence of his spending, his lies, his public performance of success built on theft. The folder was getting thick. Outside my window, I could see the stars Grandpa used to point out from his back porch. He'd taught me their names, told me stories about navigation and patience, about how the North Star doesn't move, even when everything else is spinning, about staying true to your course. I was staying true to mine. Marcus had made his choices, taken what wasn't his, lied to everyone who loved him, and now he was going to learn what it felt like when the ground disappeared beneath your feet. 5 weeks until his grand opening. 5 weeks to let him believe he'd won. 5 weeks to watch him commit every dollar, every promise, every piece of his future to a foundation built on sand. I opened my laptop and started a countdown calendar. The grand opening was scheduled for October 14th. Vincent filed the will on October 13th at 4:47 p.m., just as the courthouse was closing. By the time Marcus's lawyers could respond, it would be too late. The probate judge had already scheduled an emergency hearing for October 16th, based on the theft complaint and fraudulent loan documentation. But Marcus didn't know any of this. On October 13th, he was hanging celebratory banners. I drove past his food truck that evening. Marcus's Gourmet Street Kitchen was painted in gold letters across pristine silver. A line of people already waited, drawn by the social media campaign he'd been running. Local food bloggers, a reporter from the Tribune. Marcus stood by the service window in a custom chef's coat, laughing and shaking hands. He'd hired 4 employees. Their wages were probably bleeding him dry already. The truck gleamed under professional lighting he'd rented. Everything looked perfect. I parked 3 blocks away and watched. Marcus's face glowed with pure joy. This was his dream, built on my inheritance, wrapped in lies and about to collapse in less than 24 hours. My phone rang. Vincent. Everything's filed. The judge reviewed the theft evidence and the fraudulent loan documents. She's furious. I've never seen an emergency hearing moved this fast. His voice carried grim satisfaction. The lake house will be seized by the bank tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. The trust fund is already frozen. And I contacted Raymond Chen. He's returning the watches voluntarily to avoid prosecution. You'll have them back by next week. What about Marcus's business loan? I asked, watching my brother pose for photos with customers. Vincent sighed. That's the complicated part. Because he used fraudulent collateral, the bank will call the entire loan immediately. $50,000 due in full within 30 days, or they'll pursue legal action. Combined with his other debts, the truck lease, the licenses, the employee contracts, he's looking at roughly $240,000 in immediate debt with no assets to cover it. $240,000, more than what he'd stolen. I felt nothing but cold certainty. And the criminal charges? Vincent paused. The district attorney is reviewing the fraudulent loan application. That's a felony. With the theft from the estate, we're looking at potential prison time if they prosecute. But that's not our decision. That's up to the DA and whether the bank wants to press charges. I ended the call as Marcus served his first official customer. The woman at the window was filmed taking her first bite, her face lighting up. Marcus high-fived his chef. This was his moment of triumph, and he had no idea it was built over a trapdoor that was already opening. The next morning, I woke at 6 a.m. The probate hearing was at 9. I dressed carefully. Charcoal suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back. Professional. Serious. The kind of person judges trust. Vincent met me at the courthouse steps. He knows, Vincent said quietly. His lawyer called mine at 7:30. The bank showed up at the lake house an hour ago with a locksmith. Marcus is apparently threatening legal action, claiming the property was promised to him. Was he served notice about the hearing? Vincent nodded. Process server found him at the food truck at 6 a.m. He's on his way here now. We entered the courthouse and took our seats in the probate courtroom. The judge, Honorable Patricia Morrison, 63, known for not tolerating nonsense, reviewed documents at her bench. At 8:55, the doors burst open. Marcus rushed in with his lawyer, a young guy in an ill-fitting suit who looked overwhelmed. My brother's face was red, his expensive suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it. When he saw me, confusion flashed across his features. Becca? What are you doing here? I didn't answer. Judge Morrison looked up. Everyone's present. Good. Let's proceed. The next 45 minutes were surgical. Vincent presented the will, authenticated by Grandpa's signature and 2 witnesses. Presented the theft complaint with Raymond Chen's signed statement, confirming he'd purchased 8 Patek Philippe watches from Marcus Hartman for $200,000. Presented photographs of the empty watch case and the dated certificates, proving the watches belonged to me. Presented the fraudulent loan documents showing Marcus had used the lake house, which he didn't own, as collateral. Marcus's lawyer tried to argue that the will was created under duress, that Grandpa was senile, that Marcus had been promised these items verbally. Judge Morrison cut him off. Does your client deny selling watches that belonged to his sister? Yes or no? The lawyer hesitated. Marcus leaned forward and whispered urgently in his ear. Finally, my client believed the watches were part of his inheritance and sold them to cover business expenses. Believed based on what documentation? Judge Morrison's voice was ice. Silence. The lawyer had nothing. Judge Morrison turned to Marcus directly. Mr. Hartman, did you or did you not enter your sister's home, access her safe, and remove 8 watches without her knowledge or permission 3 days after your grandfather's funeral? Marcus's mouth opened. Closed. His eyes found mine across the courtroom, finally understanding. Finally realizing I'd known all along. That every dinner conversation, every text message, every reassurance had been part of a plan he'd never seen coming. I thought they were going to be mine anyway. I just needed the money sooner. Judge Morrison held up her hand. That's called theft, Mr. Hartman. Regardless of future inheritance expectations, those items were bequeathed specifically to your sister. You had no right to take them. She reviewed more documents. I'm also seeing a loan application listing estate property as collateral. Property that, again, was never yours to leverage. Marcus's lawyer tried again. Your Honor, if we could request a continuance to better prepare. Denied. This is fairly straightforward. Judge Morrison signed several documents. The will is authenticated and valid. All property and assets are distributed according to its specifications. Rebecca Hartman receives the watch collection, which will be returned by Mr. Chen within 7 days, plus 60% of remaining liquid assets. Marcus Hartman's inheritance is forfeit under the estate's forfeiture clause due to theft and fraud against estate property. Your Honor, that's my client's entire inheritance, the lawyer protested. Your client stole from his sister and committed loan fraud using estate property. He's fortunate I'm limiting this to civil forfeiture. The criminal charges are a separate matter. Judge Morrison looked directly at Marcus. The bank has already seized the lake house due to your fraudulent loan. You have 30 days to repay the $50,000 or face prosecution. I'm also ordering you to return any and all items removed from estate properties, including furniture from the lake house. Do you understand? Marcus stood shakily. Your Honor, I have a business. Employees, contracts. I can't just... You should have considered that before committing theft and fraud, Mr. Hartman. Her gavel struck. This matter is settled. Clerk will prepare the distribution orders. The courtroom emptied slowly. Marcus stood frozen, his lawyer gathering papers with jerky, frustrated movements. I walked past my brother to the exit. As I reached the door, he called out, "Becca, wait, please!" I turned. His face had collapsed into something desperate and confused. You knew. This whole time you knew. I met his eyes and felt absolutely nothing. No sympathy, no regret, just cold satisfaction. I knew 3 minutes after Raymond Chen called me. The day after you broke into my house and stole Grandpa's watches while pretending to care about how I was doing. I was going to tell you. When? After you'd spent all of it? After you'd moved into the lake house permanently? After you'd sold everything Grandpa wanted me to have? I stepped closer. You hugged me at his funeral, came to my house for coffee, took me to dinner and lied to my face about where your money came from. You thought I was too stupid or too emotional to figure it out. Marcus reached for me, but I stepped back. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I messed up. But Becca, I have 4 employees who depend on me. Contracts I can't break. I'll lose everything. You already did. You lost it the moment you decided stealing from me was acceptable. I turned away, but his voice followed me, cracking now. What am I supposed to do? The bank wants $50,000 in 30 days. I have vendors expecting payment. The truck lease is 12 months prepaid and non-refundable. I'll have to declare bankruptcy. I'll lose the business, my credit, everything. Please, you have to help me. We're family. I looked back one last time. We were family, until you decided $200,000 was worth more than your sister's trust. Enjoy your food truck, Marcus. You've got about 3 weeks before the creditors start calling. I walked out of the courthouse into bright October sunshine. Vincent waited by his car. The watch collector called. He's shipping the Patek Philippes back today, fully insured. You'll have them by Friday. I nodded, feeling the weight of the last 3 weeks finally lifting. And Marcus's business? Vincent checked his phone. Already getting calls from his vendors. The news about the inheritance forfeiture is public record. Took about 20 minutes to hit the legal gossip channels. Anyone he owes money to will see it. His credit will be destroyed by Monday. We stood there for a moment, watching cars pass on the street. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that in that courthouse, someone's entire world had just ended. Finally, Vincent spoke quietly. You know he might actually face criminal charges. The DA takes fraud seriously. That's not my decision, I said. And it wasn't. I'd done what I needed to do. Recovered what was mine. Made sure Marcus understood that theft had consequences. What happened next was up to the legal system. But as I drove away from the courthouse, I thought about Marcus's face when he realized I'd known all along. The moment he understood that every confident step he'd taken had been leading him deeper into a trap of his own making. That while he'd been celebrating and spending and planning his future, I'd been 3 moves ahead the entire time. Just like Grandpa taught me. Patience, planning, and never, ever underestimating your opponent. The food truck lasted 11 days. I know because Marcus posted about it obsessively on social media, each post more desperate than the last. Day 3. Slight delay with vendors, but we're pushing through. Day 7. Temporary closure for equipment maintenance. Day 9. The posts stopped altogether. I heard what happened from Aunt Karen, who called me crying. The bank had sent collectors for the $50,000 loan. Marcus's business partner, the chef he'd hired, sued him for unpaid wages and breach of contract. 2 other vendors filed liens against the truck itself. The city revoked his operating license when they discovered he'd lied about owning the collateral property on his application. By day 11, the truck was repossessed, and Marcus was facing 3 separate lawsuits totaling $190,000. How could you do this to your own brother? Aunt Karen sobbed into the phone. He made a mistake, Rebecca. One mistake, and you destroyed his entire life. I was sitting in Grandpa's office, the 8 Patek Philippe watches laid out on the desk in front of me. They'd arrived yesterday, each one carefully packaged, exactly as I remembered. The 1956 Calatrava still had Grandpa's fingerprints on the crystal. He stole from me, Karen, broke into my house, and took the only things Grandpa specifically wanted me to have. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. But you could have helped him. You're getting most of the estate anyway. You could have let him keep something. I picked up the Calatrava, felt its weight in my palm. He could have asked. He could have waited for probate. He could have not committed fraud. He made his choices, and now he's living with them. Karen's voice turned cold. You've changed, Rebecca. You've become vindictive. Grandpa would be ashamed. That stung more than I expected, but I kept my voice level. Grandpa wrote that will 2 months before he died, Karen, after Marcus took $15,000 to fix his bathroom and never came back. Grandpa spent his last month struggling to bathe because his golden grandson couldn't be bothered to follow through. So no, I don't think Grandpa would be ashamed. I think he'd be relieved someone finally held Marcus accountable. She hung up. Within an hour, I received texts from 3 other relatives. My cousin Jennifer. Can't believe you'd be so cruel. Uncle Robert. Family is supposed to forgive. My mother's sister, who I barely knew. Your mother would be ashamed of you. I blocked all of them. They hadn't been there when Marcus was spending my inheritance. hadn't cared when he posted celebration photos, hadn't questioned where his sudden wealth came from, but now that he was facing consequences, suddenly, I was the villain. 2 weeks after the hearing, Vincent called with an update. The district attorney decided to prosecute. Marcus is being charged with grand theft and loan fraud. His lawyer is trying to negotiate a plea deal, but it's not looking good. He's facing 3 to 5 years. I closed my eyes. Despite everything, hearing that felt different than I'd expected. Not regret exactly, but something heavier. When's the hearing? Preliminary hearing is next month, but Rebecca, there's something else. Marcus tried to contact Raymond Chen directly, offered him $10,000 to recant his statement. Chen reported it immediately. That's witness tampering. The DA is adding charges. My brother really couldn't help himself. Even while drowning, he was still trying to manipulate and scheme his way out. What happens now? Probably a plea deal for 7 years reduced to 4 with good behavior. Unless he goes to trial and loses, then the full sentence stands. Vincent paused. For what it's worth, you didn't do this. He did this to himself every step of the way. We hung up, but his words didn't make me feel better. I'd won. Completely. Devastatingly. Marcus had lost his inheritance, his business, his reputation, and now potentially his freedom. The victory was total. So why did I feel hollow? I looked around Grandpa's office. I'd inherited this house too. 3 bedrooms, the garden Grandpa loved, the porch where we'd counted stars, worth approximately $800,000. Combined with the investments and savings, I was looking at close to $2 million, more money than I'd ever imagined having. And Marcus was looking at prison. I picked up my phone and scrolled through his social media one last time before he'd deleted everything. The photos of him at the food truck, so proud, so certain he'd finally made it. The comments from friends and family congratulating him. The life he'd built on stolen money, yes, but also on real work. He'd hired employees, created recipes, built something tangible. Then I scrolled back further, to the photos of him at the lake house, using furniture he'd bought with my inheritance, drinking expensive wine on a dock he'd never own. The caption thanking Grandpa while simultaneously betraying everything Grandpa had wanted. And I remembered dinner at Riverside Grill, the way he'd looked me in the eye and lied. The casual cruelty of asking about estate paperwork while hiding what he'd done. The hug goodbye that meant nothing. The hollow feeling hardened back into certainty. Marcus hadn't made one mistake. He'd made 1,000 choices. To break into my house, to steal the watches, to sell them immediately, to lie to my face repeatedly, to commit fraud for a business loan, to spend every penny assuming more was coming, to try to intimidate Raymond Chen into lying for him. Every single step had been a choice, and every single consequence was earned. 3 weeks later, Marcus's lawyer called me. My client would like to speak with you. He's prepared to offer a full apology and discuss restitution arrangements. I almost laughed. Restitution with what money? The lawyer cleared his throat. He's hoping you might consider speaking to the district attorney on his behalf. A statement from the victim about his character, requesting leniency. No. Silence on the line. Then, Ms. Hartman, your brother is facing 7 years in prison. A statement from you could reduce that significantly. Whatever anger you feel, surely you don't want to see him incarcerated. My brother stole from me, lied to everyone who loved him, and tried to intimidate a witness when he got caught. I don't want to see him in prison. I also don't want to help him avoid the consequences of his own actions. Tell Marcus I have nothing to say to him. I hung up and blocked that number too. That afternoon, I drove to the lake house for the first time since Grandpa died. The bank had cleared out Marcus's furniture, but the space still held memories. Grandpa teaching me to fish off the dock, summer barbecues, the tire swing that still hung from the old oak tree. This was mine now too. The estate settlement had finalized, and Vincent had handled the bank's claim on the fraudulent loan. I walked through the empty rooms, imagining what I'd do with it. Maybe rent it out. Maybe keep it for myself. Maybe sell it and invest the money. Whatever I chose, it would be my choice. Not stolen, not taken. Earned by simply being the grandchild who'd been there, who'd loved Grandpa without expecting anything in return, who'd shown up. As the sun set over the lake, my phone buzzed one final time. A text from an unknown number. Please, I'm begging you. I'm sorry. I'll do anything. Please help me. Marcus, using someone else's phone. I stared at that message for a long time. Thought about all the times in our childhood when Marcus had gotten away with things because he was charming, because people liked him, because someone always bailed him out. How that pattern had taught him he was untouchable. How he'd carried that belief into adulthood, assuming the universe would always bend in his favor. And how this was the first time in his entire life that it hadn't. That actions had actually, finally, permanently mattered. I deleted the message without responding and watched the sunset paint the lake gold and red. Somewhere, Marcus was probably panicking, calling everyone he knew, desperate for someone to save him. But I wasn't that person anymore. I thought about what Grandpa used to say when I'd come to him upset about something Marcus had done. Some people need to hit bottom before they learn, Becca. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let them fall. At the time, I'd thought it was harsh. Now I understood. Saving Marcus would just teach him that theft worked, that family would always clean up his messes, that consequences were negotiable if you begged hard enough. The plea hearing happened on November 8th. I didn't attend, but Vincent did, and he called me afterward. 5 years, he took the plea deal. With good behavior, probably out in 3.5. 5 years of Marcus's life. I tried to feel something. Guilt, satisfaction, anything. Instead, I just felt tired. How did he look? Broken, Vincent said quietly. His lawyer tried one last time to get a victim impact statement from you requesting leniency. The judge asked if you were present. When she heard you weren't, she added an extra 6 months to the sentence for the witness tampering charge. Said it showed continued attempts at manipulation rather than genuine remorse. That night, I opened the safe in Grandpa's bedroom, my bedroom now since I'd moved into the house. The 8 Patek Philippe sat in their velvet case, each one precisely placed. I picked up the 1956 Calatrava and held it up to the light. Grandpa had worn this on his honeymoon, had checked the time with it for over 60 years, had specifically written in his will that these watches should go to me because he knew I'd understand their value. Not their monetary worth, their history, their meaning. Marcus had seen $200,000. I saw Grandpa's legacy. And that difference was why I had them back, and Marcus was going to prison. I locked the case and went downstairs to the office. The spreadsheet I'd created 3 months ago was still open on my laptop. Marcus's debts, his expenses, the gap between his expectations and reality. Every number had proven correct. Every prediction had come true. I'd mapped out his destruction with mathematical precision, and he'd followed the path exactly as I'd known he would. Some people might call that cold, calculating, vindictive, but I called it justice. Marcus had gambled that I'd be too emotional, too trusting, too weak to fight back. He'd assumed he could take whatever he wanted because he always had before. He'd mistaken my grief for vulnerability. He'd been wrong. I closed the laptop and walked through the house, my house, turning off lights. $3.2 million of inheritance. The watches, the lake house, everything Grandpa had worked for, now in the hands of someone who'd actually cherish it. And Marcus had nothing but 5 years to think about what he'd done. The food truck was auctioned off to cover debts. The employees found other jobs. The financial district spot was leased to someone else. Everything he'd built on stolen money had evaporated like it never existed. Which, in a way, it hadn't. It had all been a fantasy built on something that was never his. The phone rang after midnight. Aunt Karen again, drunk this time. You proud of yourself? Your brother's going to prison because you couldn't forgive one mistake. I hung up and blocked her number too. Forgiveness was for people who apologized sincerely, who took responsibility, who showed genuine remorse. Marcus had done none of those things. Even at the plea hearing, according to Vincent, Marcus had tried to claim he'd been under financial pressure and made an error in judgment. Not, I stole from my sister. Not, I betrayed my family. Just passive language that erased his own agency, his own choices, his own cruelty. An error in judgment was taking the wrong freeway exit. What Marcus did was calculated theft followed by calculated deception, followed by calculated fraud. And now he was calculating how to survive in prison. I fell asleep that night in Grandpa's bed, my bed, with the watch case on the nightstand. When I woke, November sunlight was streaming through the windows. The same windows Grandpa had looked through every morning for 40 years. I was 34 years old, financially secure, and I'd successfully defended what was rightfully mine against someone who'd tried to take everything. Some people would say I should feel guilty, that I was too harsh, that family should forgive. Those people hadn't watched Marcus hug them at a funeral while planning to rob them. Hadn't sat across from him at dinner while he lied about every word. Hadn't spent 3 days discovering the theft, and then 3 months carefully, methodically, ensuring he'd face every possible consequence. I didn't feel guilty, I felt victorious. And I felt for the first time since Grandpa died, like justice actually meant something. 18 months later, I was refinishing the dock at the lake house when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Rebecca Hartman? A woman's voice, professional and clipped. This is Carol Henderson from Riverside Correctional. I'm calling about your brother, Marcus Hartman. My stomach tightened. What about him? A pause. I'm not supposed to make these calls, but Marcus has been. He asked me to tell you he understands now what he did. He wanted you to know he's not asking for anything, just that he finally gets it. I set down the sandpaper and stared out at the lake. That's all? That's all? He said you'd probably hung up by now, but if you were still listening, he wanted you to know he's taking accounting courses. Wants to help other inmates avoid the financial mistakes he made. Thought you'd appreciate the irony. I almost smiled. I do. After she hung up, I sat on the half-refinished dock and thought about Marcus in prison, teaching accounting. It was so absurd it almost seemed fictional. But maybe that's what rock bottom looked like. My charming, manipulative brother finally understanding that his actions had destroyed his life and trying to find meaning in the wreckage. I didn't call him. Didn't write. That door was closed and would stay closed. But knowing he'd finally grasped what he'd done satisfied something I hadn't known still needed satisfying. The lake house renovations were almost complete. I'd turned it into a rental property that generated $4,000 a month. Grandpa's main house I'd kept for myself, slowly making it mine while preserving his memory. The watches stayed in their case, and once a year on Grandpa's birthday, I took them out and cleaned each one carefully. The investment accounts had grown. I'd quit my job and was consulting part-time, using Grandpa's legacy to build security I'd never imagined possible. Not just for me, but for any future family I might have. This inheritance would span generations now, the way Grandpa had always intended. Vincent and I had lunch quarterly to review estate matters, though there weren't many left. At our last meeting, he'd mentioned that Marcus's fraud case had become something of a cautionary tale in legal circles. They teach it in white-collar crime courses now, he said, almost apologetically. The case where the sister documented everything and waited for maximum impact. I'd nodded. Good. Let it be a lesson. Let other people think twice before stealing from family. Let them understand that not everyone will roll over, that some people fight back, and that consequences are real. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard scraps about Marcus's life. He'd lost all his friends. Turns out people don't stay close to convicted fraudsters. Aunt Karen visited him monthly but had stopped speaking to me entirely, which was fine. Our cousin Jennifer had apparently asked him why he'd done it, and his answer was, I thought I'd get away with it. I always had before. At least he was finally being honest. As for me, I dated occasionally but was in no rush. I had Grandpa's house, his watches, his legacy, and the satisfaction of knowing I'd protected all of it. Some nights I sat on the porch and looked at the stars, the same ones Grandpa had shown me, and felt him there. Not watching. Just present. The watch collection was recently appraised at $320,000. The value had increased since Grandpa's death. Vintage Patek Philippe's were skyrocketing. Marcus's $200,000 theft would be worth significantly more if he'd waited. But patience had never been his strength. It was mine, though. Grandpa had taught me that. And in teaching me patience, he'd taught me how to win. I received one letter from Marcus, forwarded through the prison system. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. Inside was a single page, handwritten. Becca, I know you won't forgive me. I'm not asking you to. I just need you to know that I understand what I took from you. Not the money, the trust, the relationship, the family. I destroyed all of it for a shortcut that destroyed me instead. I was always the golden child. Everyone always forgave me, helped me, bailed me out. You were the first person who didn't. You were the first person who let me face what I'd done. I hated you for it. I still hate you for it sometimes. But I also know it was the only thing that could have stopped me. I would have kept taking and lying and manipulating until something even worse happened. You ended that pattern. I'm in here because of my choices, not yours. I know that now. I hope the watches bring you joy. I hope Grandpa's house feels like home. I hope you know you did the right thing, even when everyone told you that you didn't. You were stronger than all of us. Marcus. I read it 3 times, then filed it in the estate folder. Not as forgiveness, not as reconciliation, just as evidence that justice, real justice, sometimes actually worked. Marcus would be released in 2 years. He'd be 38 with a felony record, no money, no business, no family support, and no one to blame but himself. He'd have to rebuild from absolute zero, the way people do when they've lost everything. And he'd do it knowing I was living comfortably in Grandpa's house, wearing Grandpa's watches, managing Grandpa's legacy exactly as it was meant to be managed. That wasn't cruelty. That was consequence. The difference between us had always been simple. I understood that actions mattered, that you couldn't charm or manipulate or smile your way out of theft and betrayal. That eventually, if you took and took and took, someone would make you pay it all back. I was that someone, and I'd never apologize for it. Last month, I drove past the spot where Marcus's food truck used to park. There was a different truck there now, successful and thriving. Life had moved on. The space Marcus tried to claim had been filled by someone who'd earned it legitimately. That felt appropriate. I still lived in Grandpa's house, still managed the properties, still wore the Calatrava on special occasions. And every single day, I woke up knowing I'd fought for what was mine and won completely. Marcus was in prison. His business was gone. His reputation was destroyed. His inheritance was forfeited. Everything he'd tried to steal had been reclaimed and protected. Some people called me cold for not helping him. Those people didn't know what it felt like to be betrayed by someone you trusted, to have your grief exploited, to be seen as weak and stupid and easily manipulated. Those people had never had to become steel to protect what mattered. I didn't need their understanding. I had Grandpa's watches, Grandpa's house, and Grandpa's legacy. I had justice. And I had the absolute certainty that I'd done exactly what needed to be done. Marcus had gambled everything on my weakness. He'd lost everything because I was strong. That wasn't something to feel guilty about. That was something to be proud of. The sun set over the lake, painting everything gold. I locked up the house, set the security system Marcus's theft had made me install, and went to bed surrounded by everything he'd tried to take. He'd have 2 more years in prison to think about that, and I'd have the rest of my life to enjoy the victory. Justice wasn't pretty, it wasn't kind, it wasn't forgiving, but it was real. And sometimes that was enough.